So you had talked last time on what games that we were going to talk about. Before we jump into some of the even bigger heavy hitters, I gotta get some notable games that were basically they were born on the PS2 and they died there, like the one hit wonders, but they were amazing. So the first one I'm going to mention is Zone of the Enders. That game was another one of these like Gundam games with a bunch of themes that I didn't understand about war and stuff. And like this game was visually stunning. Did you ever play that game?
So I didn't play it on PlayStation 2. I played the remastered versions on PlayStation 3. A- And from what I understand, they were not a very faithful representation of the game. So I guess my version of the game is tainted slightly. But yes, I did play it.
I mean that game was really good. The story really wasn't there. The gameplay was there. The story wasn't there. But if you wanted some really good story from the Zone of the Ender series, The Fist of Mars on the Game Boy Advance was an incredible story. I remember beating that game and handing it over to Lemon so he could go on a trip. I was like, "You got to play this game, dude. It's so good." And he was like, "I don't know." And then he came back from his trip and he was like, "That game was incredible." Like I told you, man, it was crazy. Like the controls in that game were so cool. You go into it was a turn-based Fire Emblem like game with the mechs. But then when you would go to attack somebody, it would enter this like action screen where you had to like aim the attack at the weak point before the timer ran out, and it was moving like crazy fast. And then you're like, bam! Then you'd hit the weak point and do a ton of damage, or if you just freaking missed, and it was like, whoa, that was cool. But that Zone of the Enders is one. Another game. I don't know if you played this. I kind of want to go back and play it, but I remember just the grind fest that it was. But it was really cool. I think it was kind of like supposed to be an answer to Legend of Zelda in a way, and it was called Dark Cloud. Did you ever play that game?
Yes, yeah.
Okay. Now my memory for it is kind of small, and I played it a lot, but I don't remember like the story really. But the gameplay where you could get like the different weapons and you could upgrade the characters if you got the right food for them. There was like tons of different characters to get and level up, but you could only play one at a time, and it was an action game. And you go and explore like the dungeons, and they were kind of roguelike a little bit, if I recall, as far as like the monsters. And then you would like build a town or something, I think.
Yeah, there was kind of like I don't even know how to describe it. Almost like a build menu that was separate from the other parts of the game. I don't remember why you were building or what you were building. Like you said, maybe I know you were going into the dungeon to get materials, but I don't remember exact thing that you were doing.
So I'm just kind of rapid firing going through these because
Yeah.
not there's a lot to talk about with each of these games, and you could talk about them forever because they're good. They are good. Just because I didn't beat them or I don't have a lot to say about them doesn't mean they weren't a good game. But here's a game that was really disturbing. But if you like slashers, you like slasher movies, this game was crazy. I was in college when my roommate, who I went to high school with, I'm sure you remember Lucas, he pulls this game out. He's like, "You got to play this game. It's brutal." It's called Manhunt. Did you ever play that game?
No, I've never played that.
Oh my god, it was disturbing. It was like this action game, but it was like slow paced. Think like Jason from the slasher movies. Why I can't remember the name of those movies right now. Oh, my wife would kill me. Not Halloween, but anyway. But Halloween 2 with freaking Michael Myers. Like
Yeah, yeah.
just like that slow pace, like walking towards the bad guys. But it was bad other killers that you were killing, and man, you could garrote them, you could chop through their neck, you could stab them to death. It was so disturbing. I was like, why did they make this game? But it was pretty fun. I remember trying to like, because you would have to try to like 100% the level, by killing all the others like psycho killers that were in the area. Of course, I don't remember the story that well, but I remember playing that with him, being like disturbed by that game. Like, I don't know if that would be a game I'd go back and play. I don't know, but
Yeah.
I remember it. You got any hidden memories there?
Yeah, I've got a couple to rapid fire on here. So the first one that I thought of was X-Men Legends. I don't know if you remember that game. It was kind of a four. You had a party of four, and you rotated between the different X-Men, and they all had different powers that you would level up. I couldn't tell you the story of that one. I think it was something to do with the Sentinels were trying to capture all the X-Men or something like that. But basically, you would just rotate through the different X-Men. It was like an action adventure game where you would just go through and blast everything. Kind of like a arena full of goons, and you would just blast them with your X-Men powers. Again, not a very memorable game or anything like that, but I remember it being pretty fun. The other one was a random Lord of the Rings game where you don't play as the three, Aragorn, Legolas, and Gimli. You don't play as those three, but you play as a human, an elf, and a dwarf, and you go through kind of like the side adventure, what was happening adjacent to the story of the Fellowship of the Ring. I don't remember what the story was in that either, but I remember it being so fun. Again, kind of just a arena game where the room fills full of goons and you just kill them, level up those three characters. And then the last one that I had was Star Wars Battlefront. I don't know if you those games. I distinctly remember this is one of those games where you would bring it over and play it with friends because it was you versus the enemy, PvE, and you would just get like 100 kills in a match. And obviously the story mode was you were trying to take over the entire map. Oh my gosh, those games were so addicting. It was so fun leveling up your guy and getting different weapons and different attachments and stuff. It was so fun.
Man, you were talking about that Lord of the Rings game that you played. There was this fucking Lord of the Rings FF10 clone that was made around that time after Final Fantasy X, And I think it was called Third Age. I don't remember. My younger brother got it, and I always was like, it's not that cool. Of course, I don't know why I didn't really care that much about Lord of the Rings as a kid, because it's literally like one of my favorite series now. It's like my older brother likes Star Wars. Mine is now Lord of the Rings with my youngest brother. I wish I played that game. That's one I probably will go back and play at some point. But again, I don't think you're playing the main cast. I can't remember though. But it would be cool to go back and play that. I've got another. I don't know if it lived and died on the PlayStation 2. I think they've since brought these games to Steam. Maybe not all of them. Way of the Samurai. Did you ever play that game?
Oh yeah, yep.
Oh my god, what a cool game. We had all these storylines. Me and my younger brother Bryce, we would play this game, in tandem almost. Like he would start a guy, and then if he died, because you would play so long, and then the story would end based on what you did. And we would take turns, and we had our own characters. We were trying to name them all kinds of stuff, and it was in Japanese. Of course, we didn't know Japanese names, so we just made stuff up. And I don't remember what Bryce's guy's name was, but I remember my guy. He was like a white-haired old man that wore a red robe, and we called him Hitai. But I didn't tell Bryce that I put it on easy mode when he wasn't looking. So he was like getting his ass kicked up and down, and I'm just beating the shit out of all the guys. He's like, "You're so good." He's like, "That's crazy. What do you do?" I was like, "I just do like this." And then he finally saw that the save file said easy. He goes, "Hey, wait a minute. Why is that on easy mode?" And I was like, "Well, it's easy for Hitai because he's a samurai." And he was like, "Stop. He was so mad then. Of course, now he thinks it's funny, but at the time he was like, "You fucking cheated me. You're cheating." I'm like, "Oh, well, it was just fun." There's another. I didn't really get to beat this game all the way, but people talk about it, and it's still out there, and it didn't live and die on this system. But it was Okami. That was a game that everybody, I think, people that literally kind of was the Zelda game on the PlayStation. What a
Yeah.
crazy game that was too. Did you play that?
So I don't know how this came to be. I want to say there was like a bunch of games that I played on. I want to say on the GameCube first, and then they somehow made their way over. Beautiful Joe is another one that I think of, kind of in that same vein. But yeah, I remember those games being so. Obviously they're Nintendo games first, and then they come over to PlayStation. But they were so colorful and so bright, and fun and beautiful and all that stuff. So stylistic. And then it's like, wow, that's amazing. And then like you said, you come to find out, okay, well these are ports from other systems. It's like, wow, that's really cool.
And Beautiful Joe and Okami, to name them together like that, that's just a stroke of genius in my opinion there of you,
Yeah.
because they
Yeah,
both were
yeah.
stylistically like in that. It was like cell shading, I think, because that was about the time of. I want to say that was about the time of the Zelda game Wind Waker,
Hmm.
which was notoriously at the time not liked. Of course, I was like, oh, another Zelda game. Here we go. Hell yeah, I'm ready to play that. That looks sick. That looks like the old game, In my brain, I was sitting there, I was like, that looks like A Link to the Past if they'd made it now, because I was young. Those two games were awesome. Beautiful Joe was awesome. What a cool game. Henshin to go, baby. Henshin
Yeah.
around, That was really cool. I want to say that's kind of a PlayStation game. But here's another one that I don't think they ever made any kind of a sequel to. I think this was I don't know if this was a game Sony made themselves, but Ico. Did you play that game?
The name sounds familiar.
You play like as a little boy with horns, and you got to guide this girl through all the puzzles. Yeah.
Oh, I know what you're talking about. I did not play that one. I played I guess the spiritual successor to that, but I did not play that one. Yeah, so Shadow of Colossus was kind of my introduction into that style of game. That and it really is its own genre because the characters, the story itself is beautiful story, but you almost don't even know what you're doing while you're playing. You're given this sword, you go fight these monsters, and every time you fight them, the sword fills up with shadow. Then you come back and dump all the shadow out, and you're obviously trying to save your girlfriend. And then, spoiler alert, it turns out things aren't always as peachy as they seem. Yeah, I just remember being hit so hard by the visuals of that game, the style and the idea that that's all it is. It's just boss fights, and that's the whole game. There is no grinding to get there. There is no anything I'd ever played before. It was literally just point your sword in the sky. It tells you where the next bad guy is, and you
Yeah.
go fight it.
Um, they really were just like explore with the character, like literally. Very immersive. Well, there's a certain someone that we know that hates that word sometimes, but those games, both of them, because I really only watched Shadow of the Colossus, but I played Ico, and they were very immersive because you were just sitting there trying to listen for anything. Because in a world where voice acting had become very normal, the only voice that you heard in this game was a Zelda, a Link like but it was like Oba, like calling whoever it was, be the horse in Shadow of the Colossus or the girl in Ico. What a strange genre. I don't know if it's really any other games have been made in that style. But I wanted to touch on some of the cowboy games that were on the system. Red Dead Revolver, which now we know has come all the way around to the modern games. This was not a game that I really played. This once again was more Bryce's cup of tea. That and the game Gun, if you ever played that.
Yep.
Both of those were those cowboy games that I just kind of watched those, but they were very much inspired by some of the cowboy movies that we had grown up on, Clint Eastwood and stuff.
Yeah, I think that was kind of, we mentioned that with the ninja themes and all of that. I think the PlayStation 2 era was very good about latching onto these themes or kind of these overarching characters, that it just felt like you were a part of, not necessarily a part of history, but you were kind of picking something out of history. And it was like, oh, that's something that I'm interested in. Those things are cool, and you became that for the game. I don't think you'd really gotten a piece of that on the PlayStation 1, but PlayStation 2, like you said, it certainly flourished, cowboy games, ninja games, night games, kind of all of that. Yeah. Well, I'll jump in here with my next genre, I guess you want to call it, but the Mobile Suit Gundam series of games, uh, Fe- yeah, Federation versus Xeon and Journey to Jaburo. Oh my goodness, man! If you want to talk about just like chef's kiss, if you had to define me as a person, and I couldn't speak, I would just hand you these games and just be like, "This should catch you up." I think.
I was waiting for you to bring that up because I wanted you to be the one to talk about that because those games are incredible.
I don't know what it is about Gundam. I mean, objectively, the stories are good. They, like you said, I think at the time they were probably a little bit over our head in what we could conceptualize and what we could latch on to. But for whatever reason, um, Gundam Wing was kind of the one that got me, and then I went back and watched some of the early ones. I distinctly remember buying VHS tapes of Gundam shows, with Char and kind of those iconic villains, and just being in awe of like the idea of it. These giant mechs, people fighting in these wars that, for all intents and purposes, it was an analogy for World War II and all of that stuff. To kind of this allies forcing you into war that you didn't really want to be in. This totalitarian way of thinking on the one side, and it's like they're evil, black and it's black and white, there is no gray, they're the bad guys and we're the good guys kind of thinking. But oh my goodness, those games, not only obviously the single player games were amazing, but then to turn them back around, they all had extensive multiplayer modes where they were so diverse. The different suits had different powers and stuff that you could use. It really felt like a fighting game on top of, the story mode.
I'd really like to dive into that topic that we always want to talk about, which is like who's your main. But Federation versus Xeon, I remember just recent. It was more recent years for us, but we had all got together and we'd whipped out the PlayStation 2. We were over at my dad's out there in the garage, and my dad was out there watching us play games, and we were playing that game, and he was
Yep.
like getting into it, and like I remember getting the Xeon Zaku, like the green one with the fucking gun pod, the grenade pods on the feet, boom, 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 boom. Every time you take a step, I just thought that was the coolest fucking. Like that one was the coolest one for me. That was the one I played. That was the one I wanted to be every time. I could always line those fuckers up and kill people with them. And we were always like, you picked a Gundam? You're a cheater.
Yeah, no fair. Why would you take one that you only have one life when you could take one that's got 5 lives?
Yeah, you picked wrong because I'm just a regular Zaku and
Yeah.
I'm about to beat your ass.
Yeah. I don't we talk about that all the time, off camera, obviously, but that idea of tier lists and like this is the best guy and we're not going to pick him because he's top tier. I feel like this game really started that idea of the low tiers can still not only win, but they're sometimes better than the upper tier guys.
Well, and I get it stylistically, like, right? Like one Gundam can take out maybe 4 or 5 Zaku's by himself, but we only have enough money for one Gundam or enough Gundanium or whatever it was, for whichever storyline, whatever you want. So really, it's kind of cool. You kind of see like, yeah, if it's just one, he gets wore down. He does need help. It's a design choice, and it was really interesting. But of course, at the time, we were like, that sucks. Why would
Yeah.
you only want one life? I fuck up too much,
Yeah. Now, I will say it was incredibly funny picking the gun tank, and as soon as the fight starts, you launch your rockets and you could kill somebody, because you had to get in range, and most of the Zaku's you had to get within melee range. And so starting the fight and instantly winning and be like, okay, next round. That was insanely fun.
Oh, yeah. Dude, we played that game for hours, man. It was so good. Of course, if we're going to still talking mobile suits, that was about the time that Lemon had gotten me into Robotech, and they had made this Robotech game called Battle Cry. It's probably one of the best Robotech games ever made, and it will probably be the last Robotech game ever made because of how that company is run. But man, it was an incredible game. It was on the level of Star Fox as far as arcade shooter, but with a more robust system, as far as to be run on, like the PlayStation 2 itself. If Star Fox had been made for the PlayStation 2, it probably would have been this game. And it is incredibly fun. The storyline is really great because you're not following the main character of Robotech, you're following like Wolf 10, and just like being in the wake of the main characters, but also experiencing the same things and the horrors of that storyline of just the humanity being on its back foot. And it's just an incredible story. It's right there with Gundam and Robotech being just as influential as Gundam in its genre.
Yeah, I think that was kind of right there along with the Dragon Ball Z era of animation style game. Not just that style of game, but I think also that style of show where it was just so. The style was something we had never seen before. So yeah, I was totally engrossed in all of those. Obviously, like you said, we kind of had a pick your favorite and then latch onto that every single time you play the game. But I still had fun every time.
Well, and we kind of got started on talking about the PlayStation 2 when we were trying to talk about this title, but Front Mission 4, and I know you played that.
Again, that was kind of one of those games where you pick it up on a whim. It's a mech game by Square Enix. At this point, they had become Enix. Enix and Square had SquareSoft had merged. So it's like, okay, I'll give it a shot. It was one of my favorite games on the PlayStation 2. It's the story is ridiculous. You find enough gold, an entire country's worth of gold, and then you have to try to somehow get it out and get it into a safe place, and then just customizing your mechs and having fights and battles. It was insane. It was ridiculous. I loved it.
Fully voice acted. Again, the horrors of war. It was the same kind of themes that really draw you into the giant mech storyline, which is always really funny. It's like, we don't have enough food or supplies, but somehow we're piloting giant mechs. Suspend your disbelief for a second, dummy. I will. Wow, what a story. And I think if we're going to keep talking about science fiction and big mechs and all that stuff, we got to circle back around to Metal Gear Solid. So Metal Gear Solid 2 came out, and I was so excited for this game. And I'm sure you were too. But then after you get off the tanker, you have to play this little wiry little guy that's calling himself Snake, and his name is Raiden. And I'm just like, I hate this guy. I hate him. And then I start eating the cracker, and I'm like, I love him. What was your experiences playing Metal Gear Solid 2 after playing Metal Gear Solid 1 over and over?
Well, so it was exactly kind of what you said, to the extent that I didn't even play 2 until after 3. I kind of had the spoiler, or I guess the reveal spoiled for me in that Raiden was the main character. So I skipped it. I didn't play it until after I had played 3, and then I went back. And it was the exact same thing you said. After I went back and played it, it was probably my second favorite one of all time.
Well, it's just great because it really jumped into like one of my favorite themes, and really that started for me in Mega Man X with the Zero character. Because like my older brother would always take the main guy like Mega Man, and then I would get stuck with number 2 guy. For me, it was always, then it was Shadow, and then it was Zero. Of course, my other younger brothers, they didn't give a crap that their older brothers liked something. They would just like it too. And they were probably better men than I was, because I would be like, no, I can't be the same as him. I have to be something different. So Raiden coming around being that cool number 2, he's now coming around to being Revengeance, being probably my favorite Metal Gear Solid game, just because of the style of that kind of. We're way off topic here, but I'll pull us back in by saying it's kind of like the Devil May Cry of Metal Gear, so it's a spin-off. So it's Mega Man X to Metal Gear, you know what I mean? Like,
yeah. Yep.
Those lines bouncing all back around for me. And I'm like, oh, this is my brand. How did you get my brand and my other brand? I don't understand. But Metal Gear Solid 2 was an incredible game. And then for Metal Gear Solid 3 to come out and it be the game that it was, still a very good game. It was so different than the other two, which were urban infiltration games. And this was a camouflage, I'm in the jungle game. Like, it was so weird. It still was the same game, but it was totally different.
Yeah, I mean, my experience for that was, I guess I would say a little bit different in that I saw my friend playing the game, and it was kind of like, oh yeah, those games were really fun. So I go back and play it myself, and 3 became my favorite, probably one of my favorite games of all time. Where, like you said, it was just so different from everything else. The story beats were they just hit home. I don't know why. Again, it's kind of these themes of war and loss and all of that stuff. With Big Boss and all of that. But yeah, I just felt really connected to the story, and all of the the enemies, the bosses that you fight were all very cool. You could deal with them in unique ways. It was just Metal Gear all over again, and I was hooked. I had to go back and play the second one after that.
You're talking about being able to beat bosses in any way. I like how you could just wait out that one boss and he just die of old age.
yeah. The end, if you just wait him out, he dies of old age.
I remember hearing that from a friend and being like, "What? Nuh-uh." And then you go and do it, and you're like, "What?"
Yeah. He sits there and talks about how he's used all of his life energy for this one last fight, and then you don't even engage in it.
But the PlayStation 2 was really kind of locking down like genres and locking down how stuff was. and we had talked about. I wanted to bring up a couple games that before we talk about the last one here that I had played, and then maybe you might have some in your head to say. But this is one that I've come back to play that I always wanted to play as a kid, and it was Mega Man X Command Mission. And I didn't know that it was a RPG game when I was a kid, and I've come back to play it as an adult, and it's this RPG, turn-based RPG game with Mega Man X and Zero and another guy named Axel, and it's just crazy. It is a crazy. I just didn't even know that this spin-off of a spin-off existed, and I was like, wow! And there was the only one that they made in that style, and it was visually, it was just a beautiful game, and then the systems in it were really cool. The last one for me to mention personally that I have to mention, I didn't play it at the time, but I've come back and played it recently, and I have to mention it for my friend because he sucked me into it recently, is the Phantasy Star Universe game. I'd always wanted to play a Phantasy Star game ever since the GameCube when we had gotten the Burst Blue, but we didn't have internet then. I didn't know that Universe existed. And so he was describing this game to me, and he was like, you can play it on a private server. And I was like, what? You're playing it right now? He was like, yeah, look. And man, talk about the time period that I miss as far as they just, everything was different. They embraced like elemental attacks and uniqueness, and they took chances, and they didn't care, and it was so cool. And now everything's kind of locked down and everything has to work, and I'm okay with everything working. It's just I want more broadness to come back.
Yeah, I definitely think we've kind of touched on that all over the place now, but just that idea of games being free to do whatever they want to do. And a lot of times it crashed and burned and it didn't work out. But, there was always that hidden gem that, like you said, kind of got brushed under the rug or forgotten about. And sometimes those end up being, our favorite games in retrospect.
The retrospective part of going back and playing old games, if you have time, really, is definitely worth the time, I think, to go back and play your favorite games to see how they feel now, because you've lived a longer life and you have different experiences, and the game could change meaning for you. It'd be really weird for that. Did you have any other games to add?
I was trying to go through my list here. I think we've covered just about everything. I did have one shout out. Obviously, this was played much later as a Steam game. I don't know if you've ever played Obscure, kind of one of those cheesy B movie Resident Evil knockoffs. That was one that Bryce and I played together. That was really fun. But yeah, I think we've gone through the list and hit everything I wanted to talk about.
There's one more game that we didn't talk about. We talked about it on the PlayStation, but we didn't talk about it on here. And I think we have talked about it in past podcasts, but it's Resident Evil 4.
Oh, right. Yep.
And that game changed that genre, and that game, that series, it changed that entire series. Those games went from I'm almost too terrified to play them to this is an amazingly fun game. And I played through it multiple times on all the difficulties, did challenge runs with just the pistol, all kinds of stuff like that. What was your experience with that game?
Yeah, I think that was the game that literally jumped the shark, where you literally jump over the lake monster. Yeah, I think that was the first time where Resident Evil, it took itself so seriously in 1, 2, and 3, being just something as simple as roundhouse kicking a zombie. Like, that's what everybody wants to do, you know what I mean? Leon is this CIA badass, and he should play like one, and you really felt like you were that character. And, obviously Resident Evil is very interesting story-wise and all of that, but you're right. I think it really changed the landscape from survival horror to kind of this movie-style action hero that was really fun. And, I think a lot of people kind of snub their nose at 5 and 6, but again, I think those are just as fun because they don't take themselves so seriously. Or maybe, I guess, in the opposite of that, they take themselves so seriously that absurd things start happening and they just they blow it off like it's nothing. And that, to me, is Resident Evil. That's what makes it so good.
Like Chris Redfield punching the boulder. I think that was it. Which one was that in, 5 or 6? I don't remember.
I think that was 5. Yeah.
That was incredible. He's juiced.
but you're exactly right. Well, yeah, he comes out, in all of the games, they're normal guys, they look like normal guys. And then in 5, all of a sudden he's this Arnold Schwarzenegger bodybuilder type. And it's just like, what are we doing? This is awesome.
I don't know. the PlayStation 1 and 2 were such magical systems. I know we've spent a lot of time talking about them, but the main reason that we have is because you and I have that crossover where we both have played it. I could sit here and gush about the Game Boy, the Game Boy Advance, the DS, the 3DS. I could talk on about the N64 and the GameCube, but there's not a lot of crossover there, so we wouldn't get
Yeah.
a lot of back and forth like we're getting here, where we've had these similar experiences, and well, we just didn't even know that about each other too. We I don't know, we have kind of talked about them at different New Year's events and stuff when we used to do those tournaments, but not to this in depth.
Yeah, I think kind of the whole point of doing this, we've mentioned it a couple times now, but almost talking about them and bringing them to the limelight, it keeps them from being lost to obscurity, you know? So you talk about some of the obviously everybody knows about Resident Evil 4. I don't think us talking about it, it's not going to cause some resurgence where, all of a sudden it's the most played game on Steam or anything like that, but like I especially think about those old Mobile Suit Gundam games where at the time it felt like everybody was playing those. And now you can't play that genre of game anymore. That game doesn't exist. So not only are we losing games that aren't being remade or new versions of the game are being made, the entire genres are being lost. And so I think it's important to kind of go back and catalog those and talk about them and say, these are the things that we liked. You always say vote with your wallet, buy the games that you like, but you can't. You can't buy these games anymore. And so it's important to keep them alive.
I was thinking about this. A guy in our friends group, he linked a game that he wanted everybody to play, and I'm not calling anybody out or trying to talk anything about that. It's just more or less just the type of game that it's like, hey, let's all play this, and it was this one genre that we could just go and play the other one. Like, well, we could just go play this one. Why do we got to buy that game? It looks like the same game, and it's like, well, oh, this kind of. I just don't know how games are being made now. I just don't understand. I can't keep up with it. Mostly because I don't have the expendable income to throw at it, but I also don't have the expendable time.
Yeah, there's kind of that moment when we were kids, we didn't have the money. We had all the time in the world, but we couldn't play every game we wanted to because we didn't have the money. We didn't have, we were in school for 8 hours a day. And so you get home and you do your homework and you eat dinner and, I've got a little bit of time to play some games. But now it's the complete opposite. Now we have, well, not all the time in the world. Obviously, we're still busy, but now we could play whatever game we wanted. We can buy whatever game we wanted. Now we don't have the time.
I don't think there's really much to add here. I'm not sure where we're going to go next from this topic right now. I really would like to dive into some of our other theories and opinions. Probably, we keep bringing up the whole, you know, who's your main thing. That might be a whole episode. I think might just get into that and talk about
I,
it.
I really feel like these first couple episodes, maybe we were kind of putting not only the games that affected us, but telling a couple stories and all of that. I think now we can kind of now we've got you locked in. Now you have to hear all of our crazy ramblings and all of that stuff.
I want to talk about that stuff, and we're gonna be trying to build up to this Final Fantasy VII one that we
Yeah.
really want to dive into. It's the biggest crossover for both of us, and we both have a lot to say about it, and really just want to talk about our personal opinions about it, and just really dive into the whole game. But we're gonna be doing some playthroughs, so I don't know if we'll do them together. We'll see.
Yeah.
But we do have a little thing where we tried out some mods that you'll want to check out. But I think for now, I say we call it and
Yep.
try to dive into more next week.
Sounds good to me.
All right, I think that's it. Signing off.
See ya.